Kliff Kingsbury, the first major head coaching domino to fall. What's next for the Arizona Cardinals? What's next for Kingsbury? And who's next when it comes to the NFL head coaching carousel? We got all that and much more for you on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On NFL podcast, your daily podcast covering all the biggest stories around the NFL in right around 30 minutes. We appreciate you so much for making us your first listen of the day every day and for checking us out as we're available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. It's Tuesday, so you've got the illustrious pair, critically acclaimed pair, award-winning pair, in my mind at least, Luke Braun at Luke
Winner
Braun
of
NFL.
which awards?
My awards. The awards. And Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola here, your Locked On NFL experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate you very much for being with us. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players. Choose whether or not they're going to come out at more or less than their Prize Picks projection. Get those right. You can go up to 10 times your entry. And if you are a first-time listener, you can use the promo code Locked On for a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 at prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app. Luke is going to tell you about them later on today's episode, though. It's Black Monday. It's the post-season coaching firing cycle. We're here. We made it. We're going to take a look at who's next around the NFL. We're going to take a look at all the stuff that's going on around the NFL. But first, I want to start off with the Arizona Cardinals and Kliff Kingsbury. They gave him an extension this offseason, Luke. They gave him the extension.
Kiss of death.
Before, if anything tells you you're going to fire a head coach, it's giving him an extension.
It's the extension that everybody's like, why would you do that?
Why would you give him that?
It's like the save the marriage baby. You know, it's like these guys were on the rocks and they had a kid.
Yikes.
And you're like, that's... Oof. It looks like it means they figured things out, but you know it means the exact opposite.
Everybody sees it but the mama and the daddy. I'll tell you, everybody else sees it. And that's exactly what happened here. Everybody saw it. They gave Kliff Kingsbury an extension. They extended Steve Keim. They did all that before they gave Kyler Murray the extension, and Kyler Murray outlasted both of them. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. So what's up next for the Arizona Cardinals now without a head coach and also with a general manager that has now stepped aside as well?
Right. And that means you can have a total fresh start, right? Mm-hmm. My Vikings were in this exact spot last year where they go, okay, we can kind of regroup and decide what kind of team we're going to be. You have a quarterback in place. That's Kyler Murray. I still think a lot of people are going to be very excited about him, even though his status to start 2023 will probably be in flux, but that's a short-term issue. This is a long-term decision, so that shouldn't factor in too much. But you can go in and decide, you know, who do we want to be? Do we want to be the kind of team that lets somebody come in and be judge, jury, executioner? Do we want to have, like Bill Belichick style or, whoever else, other versions of that throughout the league? Do we want to have somebody or do we want to try to have a nice pair that work well together? Like what the Vikings did. They hired Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell kind of together and made sure that there was chemistry between those two. And okay, you're the pair now. Who do they want to be? Do they want to pull up another college coach to try to work with Kyler Murray? Or do they want to get somebody with a little bit more established experience? Do they want to try to turn the Cardinals into a Ravens-like offense where it's all about Murray running? Or do they want to try to do it like what the Bills are doing with Josh Allen, where it's sort of a tool, a weapon, but there's plenty of other down-the-field stuff going on as well? I mean, Kliff Kingsbury didn't have, I think, the depth in terms of like schematically. I don't think he had the adaptability or the resilience that you need in the NFL versus college, where you can kind of get away with running the same thing over and over and over again because all of your opponents are just trying to make sure the freshmen are on the same page.
Constant turnover,
all that turnover. Yeah. They're dealing with that. They're not figuring out how to like overall change the grand metagame and college football is just too big. It doesn't move at the speed that the NFL does. And, by mid-season, both of the years that Kliff Kingsbury was good, the NFL had figured him out, and they figured him out forever this year. So I think it was definitely time. If you listen to Alex Clancy, which we have here, it was definitely time, and hopefully they can kind of build around Kyler Murray. And I like that he's getting input. I like that he gets to be kind of a part of this process because he is the Arizona Cardinals.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of Alex Clancy, here's what Alex Clancy had to say before we take a look at what could be next for Kliff Kingsbury. This is Alex Clancy from the Locked On Cardinals podcast.
It started with cell phone breaks during team practices and fruit carts during OTAs, and ended with the same problems the Cardinals were having when he took over. Kliff Kingsbury has officially been fired as head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. I'm Alex Clancy with Locked On Cardinals. Now, that's not to say that Kliff didn't have his moments. I've said for a few years now that Kliff Kingsbury can put together a great movie trailer, but the movie isn't always that great. Some very, very high highs for the Cardinals, highs that we haven't seen in a long time, namely starting 7-0 and 10-2 to start the 2021 season. But with Kyler Murray seemingly regressing towards the tail end of 2021 and before his injury in 2022, and the overall landscape of the team weakening and not strengthening in year 4, Michael Bidwell made the decision to remove Kliff Kingsbury from his post, onward and upward to the Arizona Cardinals 2.0. I'm Alex Clancy with Locked On Cardinals. Check me out Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.
Alex Clancy coming through with the Lil Wayne bars, man. Said he could make a trailer, but couldn't make the movie
for like 3 years.
He is cloud 9, cloud 10, cloud 11, whatever you want to call it. He is.
It's
so
a
happy
bright future
with this
finally. When's the last time
so.
the Cardinals have been able to look forward and say, okay, we can be anything? And that's kind of the exciting thing about this. Yeah, this was a nightmare year for Cardinals fans. But you can kind of look forward and say, okay, are we finally getting out of this? You can daydream about them becoming anything you want. You can daydream about this being the moment where they hire their Brady Belichick combo, right? And they become the dynasty. You could freely daydream about all of that, and analyze whoever comes in when he comes in. But for now, the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah, every non-playoff team is a 2023 Super Bowl competitor right now, and especially when
everybody's got 10 wins and a shot.
That's right. Especially when you have openings on all these major spots. The thing that I think is so interesting too is kind of this other conversation around Kliff Kingsbury. Where does he go next? We put this out on our Locked On Network @Locked On Network Twitter account. Is he an NFL head coach again? Is he an NFL offensive coordinator again, or does he go back to the college ranks? And Luke, based upon what you said earlier, the inability to make adjustments, the sort of inability to be able to outlast, offensive, defensive scheme, not be able to sort of work out the meta or the cheese here in the NFL, if you will, but being able to get back to those collegiate ranks where he's taken advantage of fresh meat every single year over and over and over again. I think that's probably where Kliff Kingsbury goes back. He was supposed to be the head coach of USC, the USC Trojans, and then left that job before he started that job to take over in Arizona. I could see him going right back to the college ranks and probably landing another head coaching opportunity there, and comfortably at that point.
Yeah, I think that's the best for him. He could try to do coordinator things, become a more NFL style coach. But there's no shame in being a guy that works out better at the college level. Shoot, those are better paying jobs anyway. So go ahead.
That's the truth.
Go live your dream.
Shout out Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Still making it happen. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but I think based upon him being the play caller in Arizona, it's going to be tough for him to really be able to lobby as a successful offensive coordinator. The things that he did with Rondale Moore, the things that he did with Jeff Dortch, I thought that those were really nice in terms of what he did at the wide receiver position. But outside of that, just things never really kind of came together for them.
You got DeAndre Hopkins and
Hollywood Brown, the trade,
and you're bringing in guys like Robbie Anderson to try to get even more speed on the field. And with Kyler Murray and the talent they had on that offensive side of the ball, and this is what Clancy's been saying for 2 years, you got to get more out of that. And if you're the offensive guru and you're not getting more out of your players, then what is the point of you? It was time. We have other Black Monday dealings to go over, though. What's going on in Houston, Indianapolis, the Panthers, the Broncos, all of that stuff coming up quick. But first, let me talk to you about the best way to play DFS. It is Prize Picks. Forget all the long, full roster fantasy thing. How about just pick 2 to 5 of your favorite players and forget pools with thousands of people and you have to get the craziest corner case ever to even have a shot, and that's what the sharps do. No, forget all that. How about just you versus the house for just regular old folk like you and me? Just you versus the house. Simple, easy. Whether or not they do better than their prize picks projection. If you are right, you can get up to 10 times your money. First-time users get a 100% deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On for up to $100 at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. I also want to talk to you about getting your taxes done. It is super stressful, especially if you're someone like me that always loves to put it off to the last minute. It's always a big disaster.
Hello.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, you're among friends here, and that is what TurboTax is for. An expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. And it feels good to be done with your taxes and not have to stress over it. So come to TurboTax, and you don't have to do your taxes. Just visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax. Full service products only. A video meeting while the expert does your taxes is required. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
All right, y'all, we are continuing on with this episode of Locked On NFL, looking at these postseason coach firings. It's been an eventful day already in the NFL. It's only going to be an eventful week, so we appreciate you very much making us your first listen of the day every day so we can take you all the way through it. For your second listen, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today, too, so you can get everything going on around the world of sports with our local experts taking you beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes. Find that wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. So Kliff Kingsbury, Steve Keim, the Arizona Cardinals, was kind of the big headliner for the day, but it wasn't the only moves that were made all throughout the day. I'm gonna get a couple of coordinators out of the way real quick. Couple of coordinator firings. Offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans, Todd Downing, out. Defensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns, Joe Woods, out. Cleveland Browns have said they don't plan on making any other coaching staff changes at this time until, of course, they hire a new DC and then he shakes up the defensive coaching staff. And then speaking of DC, Falcons defensive coordinator Dean Pease announces his retirement from the NFL as well. Very celebrated, very successful defensive coordinator in the NFL. And in a shock to no one, New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick confirms he'll be back in 2023. so there you go. He's doing his thing.
After what was it, a 7 seed last year they were in, and then not making the playoffs the other 2 years without Brady.
Yeah. Oh,
7
and by the
seed,
way,
and the Bills pitched a perfect game against him in the playoffs.
Yeah. And by the way, Mike Tomlin, who had all of those sort of whispers at the beginning of the season about potentially being a surprise firing by the end of the year, a 16th straight non-losing season. Remarkable.
Amazing.
Absolutely remarkable. Incredible. The AFC South, though, well, the South, it's the AFC South and the NFC South. Seeing a whole bunch of shakeup. The Houston Texans move on from Lovie Smith. The Indianapolis Colts, we'll see what they're going to do with their Jeff Saturday interim coach situation. Same thing with the Carolina Panthers. They have an interim coach in Steve Wilks. So technically those positions are open as well. Let's start with the Houston Texans, Luke. They move on from Lovie Smith in another move that shocks absolutely no one. We all kind of figured he was going to be the sacrificial lamb, but boy, did he stick it to him on the way out the door. Boy, did he let them know.
Do we have any reporting or anything that that's actually what happened? Because Lovie Smith gets up after that. For those who missed it, the Texans and Colts were in a pretty back and forth game. If the Texans lose, they get the 1 overall pick, and if they win, they get the 2 overall pick. So there's a lot on the line. There's a difference there, right? They end up scoring a game-tying touchdown, and they go for 2 and go for the win instead of the tie in overtime. And that's such a crazy move for a team that it is objectively better for them to lose that game. But if you've ever been around NFL players or been around NFL locker rooms, even, you kind of understand that they don't want to lose. How many of these guys are going to be in Houston next year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Lovie wasn't going to be, so who cares, right?
Right.
These guys are playing for their jobs. They're playing to convince Nick Caserio, although he is not 100% safe, it sounds like, Nick Caserio or whoever to keep them, right? So you're not going to dog that game. You cannot do this when this was Lovie Smith's point. You cannot ask a guy that has dreamed of being in the NFL since he was 6 years old,
right,
to get onto that field. You've finally achieved your dream and to get on that field and not try to win. That is not what these guys. You do not get into the NFL if you are ever okay with losing. You don't get to this point if
Yep.
if that mentality is possible for you at all.
Yep.
So I
Shout
respect
out.
it, and even if it's not like a direct like middle finger to the Texans, I still respect it just on the principle. It's just not going to be who these people are.
Absolutely. Shout out, by the way, in that same conversation to the Detroit Lions, who had nothing to play for except for disappointing the Green Bay Packers. And thank goodness
Kirby Joseph was like, if we're not in, you're not in.
I love it. I love it so much. For more on the Houston Texans moving on from Lovie Smith and who they are targeting for their head coaching position, here is John Hickman of Locked On Texans.
Ain't no love in the heart of the city. It ain't no love in the heart of H-Town now that Lovie Smith has been fired by the Houston Texans. I'm John Hickman of the Locked On Texan podcast, your team every day. The team didn't even wait till Black Monday to fire Lovie Smith. As soon as the plane landed on Sunday night, Lovie Smith got the news that he would be relieved from his job duties. What do we know right now from the Houston Texans? Well, we know that Nick Caserio's job is safe as of right now. We also know that the top two candidates for the head coaching position, offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, Ben Johnson, is the top candidate for the Houston Texans, and defensive coordinator in the second year in a row for the Eagles, Jonathan Gannon, is also a top candidate for the head coaching job here in Houston as well. And throughout the weekend, we heard the rumors, we saw the reports. DeMeco Ryans in Houston will likely not happen anytime soon. Make sure you check us out throughout the week as we continue to cover the Houston Texans head coaching search and the entire offseason.
When I tell you John killed me with that John killed me with that That's a loaded right there. So what we learned from John Hickman there, the candidates there, Rich Gannon, as well as, of course, Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, a hot name, though.
Yeah,
We've seen him getting a lot of attention.
Houston, Indianapolis, I believe, and the Panthers have requested him as of this recording. It might even get to be more.
Yeah, because we also still have the Denver Broncos who are, piling on their interview list. They've got Sean Payton and Dan Quinn on that list so far. So the Houston Texans have the second overall selection. They have, some talented players on the roster, although Brandon Cooks probably won't be one of them. He says he wants to be traded because at this point in his career, he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild. Shout out to you, Brandon. Closed mouths don't get fed. And then when you look at the Indianapolis Colts, as well, they're in a real different situation. That's for my Saints fans right there. They're gonna know that one. As for the Indianapolis Colts, they've already requested basically to hire or at least interview the Lions coaching staff. They've asked to interview Ben Johnson. They have asked to interview Aaron Glenn as well. Carolina Panthers will spend some time with Steve Wilks as well as Ben Johnson, and of course there will be others that will be added to this list. So let's look at this. Houston, Indianapolis, Carolina. Is one of these teams more appealing than the other?
Man, I wouldn't touch Houston with a 10-foot pole.
No.
They have gone one and done now with both David Culley and Lovie Smith. They very clearly just want to hire Josh McCown. Although maybe the Jeff Saturday thing put him off of that.
Oh, that's right.
But they just want to hire. Like, that was the deal last year. They tried to hire Josh McCown. They just forgot about the Rooney Rule and were like, well, I guess we shouldn't do that. We'll hire Lovie Smith and then fire him after a year. There was no way in the world that Lovie, he would have had to make the playoffs to stay with like Davis Mills and an expansion roster.
Right.
The Texans are a catastrophe organization. I'm surprised they are still, the building's still standing.
Yeah.
It's horrible. So I wouldn't touch that situation at all, especially if you're somebody like DeMeco Ryans, who is picking his spot. He was in interviews for head coaching last year, and he pulled out of them saying, I'm not ready. I want this to be right. He is not going to take the first job available to him only for it to just be a disaster and for him to get fired. He's not going to let himself get Steve Wilkes, which I think is what happened to Wilkes in Arizona. Because he was an O-line coach and it's like, okay, well, what he didn't have other offers. So Steve Wilkes took that job in Arizona in the Josh Rosen year. It was a disaster. They go 3-13. They get the number 1 overall pick. They fire him. They go with Kliff.
Right.
And I wonder if Steve Wilkes is thinking the same thing. He is a candidate in Carolina, but what is that situation? What is appealing about going to the Carolina Panthers or the Indianapolis Colts other than nobody else is going to hire me and maybe I want to do this? Jeff Saturday seems like he's still a major candidate in Indianapolis, despite
Everything.
gestures broadly, like
Gestures broadly.
just point to any moment in the Colts season, just pick a random one, and they're being embarrassed. Yeah, just really grim stuff from these organizations, and it's just, like, how am I supposed to take you seriously if I'm a Colts fan, right? How am I supposed to say, yeah, this is a team I'm going to spend my hard-earned money to go watch this team when they are so fundamentally unserious? I just, if I were a Panthers fan or a Colts fan or a Texans fan, I would be lighting the pitchfork on fire. We're just going to combine the torch and pitchfork.
I love it.
I would be asking for a lot more from my favorite team.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see, where these go. I think if I had to pick one of these, I'd probably pick Carolina over the others, just because I like Carolina's defense and the pieces they have there. But that's marginal.
And Brian Burns.
Yeah, it's a marginal difference. It's a marginal difference in terms of what you get there. So let's discuss now who might be the next head coach on the move, whether firing, retiring, moving on, whatever it might be. Luke and I are going to go through some of the who's next possibilities out across the NFL as the week of coaching firings could potentially continue to roll along.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But before we get into that, let me talk to you about BetOnline. It is your one-stop shop for all things betting, and you can even bet on who will hire who. You can bet on where Sean Payton's next landing spot is, or you can bet on something like who will the Texans hire, who will the Broncos hire. We haven't talked about Denver much yet, but of course they had Daniel Hackett earlier in the season. You can bet on non-football as well. You can just go bet on a basketball or a hockey game if you wanted to. Bet right in the middle of a game with their live betting module. I love that. Build wacky player props, whatever you want. It's all at BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, y'all, wrapping up this episode of Locked On NFL with a quick who's next. Where do we think the next move is when it comes to head coach? There are some that have been in the news. There are some that have been speculation. Luke, where do you think is a spot that you're watching where a new, like the next head coaching move could potentially take place?
I mean, my eyes are on LA right now and what Sean McVay is going to do. It's already been reported that he is thinking about stepping away, thinking about like he's going to take some time. And his words, if you put up his answers and like the Schefter reports about what McVay is going to do and put it right next to what Aaron Rodgers said after losing against the Lions, can you tell those statements apart?
Ooh, I mean, that's those a good point.
Two guys that just need to get away from it for a minute and think about whether this is still what they want to do next year.
Yeah.
And I get it, right? I mean, McVay has already complained a bunch about burnout. There was that kind of blowout story leading up to the Super Bowl where it kind of felt like he was a guy that was like, man, this takes too much out of me, and I don't think I want to do this till I'm 60.
Yep.
Of course he's a young guy, but I don't think he wants this to be his life for 30 years, and I get it. It's incredibly stressful. It's 18-hour days. I mean, it's insane workload. Some of these guys will just chug like 5-hour energies, or I don't know, a souped up version of that if you would prefer.
A little bit of coffee, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit of coffee, just over and over and over and over again. And you might not want to do that to yourself. You might want to live a different life. And I mean, Lord knows McVay's made his money, and he can go be on TV if he wanted to. Step away from the sport entirely if he wanted to. He could step away for a year and then come back and have his pick of whatever job he wants whenever he comes back.
Pull a Payton.
Pull exactly that. Yeah, pull a Sean Payton or a Doug Peterson or a Mike McCarthy. I mean, there's a lot of people who have done this.
Yeah.
So you could just go do that. Come back. Rams would probably take you back no matter what they do. So I'm looking for that. And if he does step away, what do the Rams do? Do they go into the ranks? Do they start interviewing Ben Johnson? Do they just promote Raheem Morris? What is the deal there? So that's the situation I'm looking at. What about you?
I agree. I'm going to stick in Los Angeles, though, and I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Chargers. It's the one I've been watching. It's the head coaching position I've been watching all season. It's the spot that I think probably outside of potentially if the Rams position were to open, I think that could be very appealing to Sean Payton. But I think that the Chargers position could be a really appealing one for him. The Cardinals could be really appealing because he could potentially bring an executive with him, like a Jeff Ireland from here in New Orleans, to kind of fill that GM spot and all that other stuff. But I've been watching the Chargers all season, and if the Chargers end up getting bounced in the first round, is that enough? Like, did they get far enough for Brandon Staley to hold on to it? Or does it come down to the nature of how they lose that game? Because they're going up against an AFC South champion Jacksonville Jaguars to open up the playoffs. So if they lose that game, is that enough for the Chargers to say, all right, we're good here, and then move on? And especially like some of the late game sort of in-game things that have gone wrong from the coaching side when it comes to Brandon Staley and the Los Angeles Chargers. If that rears its ugly head again, that's an ugly end to the season, and that could potentially put an ugly stain on Brandon Staley's time and potentially mean the end of his time in Los Angeles. And that becomes, my number one place right there for Sean Payton to end up being able to work with an ownership that's going to give him some control, being able to mix around the staff just like any other head coach would, and of course a star at quarterback in Justin Herbert. They'll have their pick of offensive coordinator there too if they were to move on from Lombardi, who's an old Sean Payton staffer. So we'll see. But I'm watching this weekend for the Los Angeles Chargers. They lose that game, I could see them moving on from Brandon Staley.
I could definitely see it if they lose that, because I believe they're favored too on the road in the playoffs against the Jaguars. Here's the deal with this too, because coach firing is not just about overall record. And I think that's a lesson that we all learned with like Marty Schottenheimer, if you want to go way back. Yeah. It's not just about, did you win enough games? Because if that were the case, the Bears would be firing their coach, right? But they're not going to do that because they understand the context. They understand that they're in a rebuild, that they didn't have a roster, that they're kind of, building this thing from the ground up. And if they're not patient with it, then it's all going to go belly up. Similarly, the amount of talent that the Chargers have on both sides of the ball, and the way that they have lost games, I know that they're the 5th seed, and it's going to be hard to win that division when you share it with the Chiefs.
Right.
So this is kind of the best you can do. But if they go get bounced, after a one and done, or they just don't look ready at all, and some of the ways that the Chargers have lost games this year have been like just squarely on Brandon Staley's shoulders. Yep. And so my question is, and you're going to have to listen to Locked On Chargers to get a better answer to it, because I don't really know it, is Brandon Staley holding the Chargers back?
Right.
And would a different name there who inherits all of, if they do fire Brandon Staley, you talk about an attractive landing spot.
That's the best job available.
That is ready to go. You can come right in and compete, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a better job than if the Rams job opens up, if you ask me.
Absolutely, because 100%. They've got a stable situation. They've got their quarterback in place. They've got all kinds of talent. I don't know. Yeah, if you do want to get rid of Staley, I think that there is absolutely an argument to be made that doing that will improve the Chargers immediately, and that you won't have to enter the sort of slow plotting rebuild that a team like Arizona is looking at, or a team like Chicago is in the middle of, or Houston. You don't have to be like that. You can kind of come in and say, here we are, and I'm going to run what I think is best for these guys with this talent. Is Staley capable of that? I don't know. I never think one game should be the referendum on that. I think you probably already have your opinion on it one way or another. But that's where I'm at on Staley.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to watch. Similarly, the Miami Dolphins, there have been some reports, I don't know if I fully buy into it, but there have been some reports that they might potentially move on from biracial king Mike McDaniel if he were to lose in the opening round of the playoffs as well.
That's wild. You wouldn't make your playoffs as a first-year coach. Like, I don't care if you're a 7 seed, and with all the quarterback injuries they had.
Yep.
It's got to just be because they wanted Sean Payton real bad, right?
That would be it. Yeah, I mean, they lost a first-round pick and a 2024 pick because they wanted him too much too early along with Tom Brady. But I don't know, man. Like, I think that would be a huge mistake by the Miami Dolphins, because you're not even guaranteed to land Peyton if you made the move in the hopes of getting him, right? Like, you kind of have to do some backdoor dealings, which they're apparently not above, because that's why they got in trouble in the first place. And then, and then another one, just to wrap us up here. that I think some folks have been watching is Ron Rivera in Washington. And I don't think that's an indictment on Ron Rivera. I just think that the Washington culture is such a weird one that that's exactly the kind of move that they would make.
Well, and he was brought in to try to rehabilitate their image.
Right.
And they're still under several unrelated federal investigations. So I don't know if they can afford to get rid of their PR, like their one PR
The
get out of
good
jail
PR
free card.
yeah.
We've got the one good dude in the organization that is generally respected. Please focus on him and not why there are several alphabet organizations investigating separate crimes that have nothing to do with each other. We just do that many crimes.
The Washington crime doers. Alleged crime doers.
Washington crime-anders.
So those are the ones that we're going to be keeping an eye out on. And of course, there's always potential for some big surprise thing that could happen as well. So you want to make sure you're keeping up with all of your favorite local Locked On podcasts, as well as, of course, here every single Monday through Friday in the Locked On NFL podcast as well. Luke, what a fun one, man. We get to do Black Monday again. It's always a blast.
We always get to do Black Monday. We'll see. Last year we did this and there were like 3 more firings, and so you got to kind of get it throughout the whole week.
Right.
So
yeah, I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that 2023 is going to be much different than that, looking at this list of teams to where they could potentially be making a move there, or some head coaching move could be happening. So make sure you're keeping it locked here in the Locked On NFL podcast. For Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter. I'm Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. Tony and James get you covered in tomorrow's episode. Don't forget, of course, make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today for your second listen. Get all of the local insight on all of these moves as well as they go down all throughout the week. I appreciate you. We appreciate you so much for making us your first listen of the day here on the Locked On NFL podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.